I move to adopt.
We'll be back. We'll be back. We'll be back.
Bye-bye.
We'll be back. We'll be back. We'll be back.
Please leave chambers so that we can continue our meeting.
You're listening to some of the activity from the full council meeting of the city of Seattle this week, as former council member Kshama Sawant and her supporters are speaking out and saying, "We'll be back," as they push back against a proposal to change the council's ethics code. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but this issue is really heating up now, and so is the activity in Olympia, as Governor Bob Ferguson comes out with his response to the legislature's near $78 billion budget proposal. A lot to cover this week on a very special Patrons First episode of Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel, and the views expressed here are mine. And my very, very special guest this week is, here she is, Hannah Krieg, who is the solo journalist behind the independent news source known as The Burner, also a force of nature. Hannah, it is always great to talk to you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit later in the podcast about what The Burner is all about. But first things first, how are you?
Oh my God, I'm so good. I'm so happy to be back on the pod. It's been a while.
I know it's been too long, and you've been working hard. I'm looking forward to talking to you more about what's going on with The Burner. So Hannah's been doing a ton of work on this ethics issue for the council and the state budget. So very glad to have her with us. And you may hear in the background, I am not in my home office. Had to take the act on the road here for a family celebration, but I could not let this week go without connecting with everyone and talking with Hannah too. So this episode is all about you patrons. If you want to get on this content before anybody else, please subscribe on Patreon. Patrons who support the show with an amount as low as $5 a month get access to Patrons First content. Get a decal for your laptop, all sorts of fun stuff. We'll even answer your questions on the show. Check it out, Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Also, a big thanks to Converge Media. The video version of the podcast is on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, time to get going here. Time for Right Here, Right Now. So the council does have a few things going on this week. There was another public hearing on the comprehensive plan. The council is trying to figure out how to deal with House Bill 1110. This is that state bill that basically allows for the building of duplexes and quadplexes just about anywhere in cities around the state. The council is working on 8 amendments and counting. I'm going to let the dust settle a little bit on that before we tackle that one next. But again, on Thursday, the council will engage on this topic of changing its ethics code. The quick backstory, once again, the council, with the advice of their Ethics and Elections Commission, want to change their ethics rules so that council members would disclose conflicts of interest and still vote on legislation that might include that conflict rather than recuse themselves, remove themselves from the vote, which is the current requirement. Hannah, you've been taking plenty of notes on this one, talking to a lot of people who are opponents to this idea, including former Councilmember Sawant. What are they saying about this?
Yeah, so I mean, this ethics change has been a long time coming. I think I originally reported about it back in November when it was just an email between some council members, and it's been pretty clear, and what opponents will tell you is that it's been pretty clear that this ethics rollback is the precursor to rollbacks to renters' rights. There are some landlords on the city council. They're currently not allowed to vote in their financial interest, so they're not allowed to vote on tenant law. And we know that Kathy Moore is looking to roll back some substantial tenant laws like the winter eviction moratorium, school year eviction moratorium, the $10 late fee cap,
right.
Other things that Kshama's office specifically fought for. And so it is the belief, and sort of through like some public records that I obtained last year, it seems like there's a chain of events that's going to happen.
Yeah,
and
right.
This is the start of it.
Right. And I'm going to jump back on that renters issue in just a little bit, but I want to make sure I engage on this question. So what do you make of the push of supporters of this legislation who would say, hey, when council members have to recuse themselves, especially within our district system, we're basically taking away the voice of District 1 or 4, et cetera. How do you respond to that piece of it?
I would take that argument a little more seriously if any constituent had come to city council to say, I feel like my voice is going to get lost if my council member can't vote in their own financial interest. But so far, I've been to every meeting where they've talked about this. No one has spoken, no constituent has spoken in favor of their council member voting in their financial interest. So I think that argument, while it might be what Kathy Moore is saying, I don't think it resonates with her constituents really at all. And if it's about the constituents, she should be listening to them.
There were a few people from the local Republican Party who were speaking out in favor of this kind of. What did you make of that? I know that was happening at Tuesday's meeting.
Yeah, on Tuesday there were, I think, three speakers at the very beginning who
Right.
had like general positive
We
feelings.
support you, council. Yeah, I heard a lot of
Yeah,
that.
general positive feelings about the council, but they didn't really speak directly to the ethics law. They're actually speaking to the renters' rights that would be thought to be repealed
Yeah.
after the ethics law. So they were
hmm
happy that that would happen, but they didn't specifically say, we really want you to be able to vote in your own financial interest to better represent us.
Right. This is an interesting one. There's a lot to this. We're going to try to deep dive on
Yeah,
this
it's
one,
kind of
folks. Yeah,
one of those
there's a
like
few.
balls you have to follow because it's like we're talking about 10 different things like layered on top of each
It
other.
does feel like that for sure. And let's talk about the timing of this because I think that's important for a few different reasons. If we can start with the federal level, please. We have a president, which, as we all know, has a history of interesting ethical choices, shall we say, including a recent decision to accept a gift of a $400 million luxury plane from the country of Qatar. That's raised critiques, I know, from people from across the political spectrum, Republicans included. And so it seems from that standpoint, this decision to go forward with this proposal comes across as really tone deaf to some critics. Is that kind of what you're hearing?
I definitely hear a ton of like comparisons with this council and the Trump administration, which a lot of people will say is very alarmist. I know the council like identifies, I think, entirely as Democrats, but the ethical comparisons between Trump's self dealings and self dealings to his friends there seems to be some comparison to the council right now.
Yeah, and I talked recently on the Council Edition show on Seattle Channel with council members Saka and Kettle, who were not showing their cards. I was like, well, how are you going to vote on this ethics thing? And they're like, well, we're still looking into this. And I think they were trying to make a distinction. We are not like the other Washington. It is something different here in Seattle, and people don't need to be scared of that. But I think there is kind of that basic ethics issue there. Like, why would you make a change like this when so many people are talking about political ethics at the national level and they're talking about it here in Seattle? That's a very difficult thing for them to get past, I feel like.
I think they're somewhat emboldened by the ethics director, Wayne Barnett, who
Right.
supports this change and who has supported it in the past. But to be clear, like the chair of the ethics commission, who's a different person, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he said there could be any number of appropriate ethical standards. But if you're doing this ethical standard with the thought of future legislation in mind, that's an ethical violation in and of itself.
Zach Pekelis, I think, is the name you're looking for there.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And I guess let's dive into that a little bit further because this was a situation where the more public face, I guess, of the Seattle Ethics and Elections Commission, the SEC, Wayne Barnett, really did talk about this with the council. And maybe I can just give the backstory here. So first things first, recusals don't happen that often. Publicola reported on this, 9 of them since 2001. But there were 2 last year that really brought this into the public eye. One was over app-based delivery drivers. Then Councilmember Tanya Wu recused herself due to her family restaurant. Legislation never went to a vote in that situation. The second was about tipped wages for restaurant and service workers. Wu again sat out. Hollingsworth brought this forward. She rescinded the bill under pressure from unions and workers at that point. So last November, I think this was you, Hannah, the Stranger reported, Council President Nelson wrote to the Ethics and Elections Commission about how it interprets the rules over recusal, and the head of ethics at that point, in response to a request from a council lawyer, said, okay, here can be some maybe possible changes to the law in November. I guess I'm trying to figure out, what does it mean that Wayne Barnett, that the Ethics and Elections Commission propose these changes? Because he points out that, hey, big cities like New York and Boston don't have this recusal law.
New York, which is famous for no ethical issues.
Right, of course. Yes, right. Good point. Yeah. But just the fact that your ethics leader is saying maybe this could be a good idea, does that lend any weight to it, or what do you think?
I mean, I think that Barnett feels caught in the middle. And I think there was like kind of an uncomfortable email exchange that illustrates that pressure he's under between him and Nelson, where he's saying, sorry that you feel like my rulings stymied your political agenda. I think he does feel like he's caught in this situation that's somewhat difficult. It could be the case that changing the ethical standards would make his job easier. It might be the case that it's fine, but I think what the chair had said and what I think maybe could be the compromise would be the council, if they really believe this is the right change, then they should make the change, but set the implementation date for when their terms are over so that the council that's currently elected follows the rules they were elected under. Then voters will get the chance to elect people under the new rules, specific to the new rules.
Right. So we're talking about 2027 elections going into 2028. A very good point there. And I'm interested to see that because I think Dan Strauss has talked about that on the council, potentially a compromise of that nature. I know Councilmember Alexis Mercedes Rink has been talking about this quite a bit too. Sorry, let me put a pin on that for a second because there is definitely election implications here. But I did want to talk about this other interesting timing that I think you brought up earlier because the council is on track to consider some changes to tenant and landlord laws this year. And you've reported this, Cascade PBS has reported this, everybody's reported this. Two council members, Solomon and Rivera, are landlords who would potentially have to recuse themselves. So Councilmember Moore, who's sponsoring this, I thought this was interesting, says the proposed change in ethics laws doesn't have anything to do with upcoming legislation. But I just think that's such a tough argument when we have these new renter and landlord laws on the docket ahead. What do you make of this conflict?
From speaking to people in City Hall, I know that's not true. I do know she's not telling the truth when she says that this isn't premeditated or the precursor to further action. I think it's really dishonest of her to say that.
I hear what you're saying. It's just one of those situations where, she may say that, but the fact of the matter is they're considering this legislation very soon that would potentially mean some changes in the way the council will vote. Is that kind of where you're going with that line of thinking? Yeah.
I mean, if it's really not about the renters thing, she should do her renters legislation first. Or she could make the argument that she thinks she could pass her renter rollbacks without this ethical change, because I honestly think she probably has the numbers for it without it.
Right. I guess that's the big argument, too. It's like, okay, if you have to recuse yourself from a vote, the logic goes, work behind the scenes and work with other council members and get them to be your proxy vote or whatever else. I mean, convince some people behind the scenes. And I don't know how much of that is happening on the second floor of City Hall right now, but that's definitely something to think about. Let me move on to this other piece, because this other interesting timing coming up is with regard to elections. So looking at this ethics proposal here, Council President Nelson's surely a supporter of this. Councilmember Rink is not, even sent out an email to a number of her supporters saying, hey, make sure you write to your council members about this. I don't think this is right. Interesting to point that out. I think about Council President Nelson. I think about Councilmember Rink. So those two citywide seats there, they're both up for grabs this election season. I'm not sure what the D2 candidates are going to say about this, but that race is up too. I'm not sure how big of a point this becomes in terms of the mayor's race out there. Help me out with this thought, Hannah, if you could. How big of a wedge issue do you see this becoming this fall?
This issue is the worst for Sarah Nelson, but I think she has so many other wedge issues under her belt that it's just another one. She also tried to repeal the minimum wage for gig workers, and she, under her watch, the city council has moved very little legislation as she's been council president.
Other than public safety, she would rejoin her, but keep going. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But just like stuff like that. Like I think there are other issues and there's other indications that she's unpopular, that this might be bad for her, but
yeah, we'll see. Yeah, and I guess last piece on this, seeing Councilmember Sawant back in council chambers now as more of a public speaker rather than a council member, but still drawing a lot of power from her crew there, her supporters. I think that's an interesting dynamic here too. I know the council members that are up there are not fans of hers at all. And seeing Councilmember Sawant, former Councilmember Sawant, have this power over these different meetings is a really tough thing for the current council to reckon with. Can you talk about that dynamic? Because you've been in those meetings. You've had your camera right up next to Councilmember Sawant as she's been testifying. Great work out there, by the way. I'm really glad you're in there and really dealing with some of this unrest that's going on. But what do you make of that dynamic? Councilmember Sawant, former Councilmember Sawant, going up against the nine current council members.
It's a tactic she definitely used even when she was on the city council, and a tactic she feels has really helped to win important victories. The same group came back to council chambers when the council tried to permanently enshrine a sub-minimum wage for tipped restaurant workers at small businesses. And there's like a couple other dynamics there in that situation that ended up killing the bill too. But we talked about it on my podcast, the Burner Seattle podcast. And she thinks that her group of Workers Strike Back coming to the council chambers and pressuring the city council was really instrumental in getting Councilmember Hollingsworth to retract her bill. And so far, it seems like in this case, Kathy Moore hasn't retracted her bill, but Sarah Nelson really doesn't know what to do with these people coming and interrupting and being loud and being like hecklers essentially to public comment. So I don't know how it's going to resolve or what's going to happen.
Yeah, a ton of question marks. We're recording this podcast earlier in the week, so we won't have a reckoning of that Thursday meeting.
I know,
of the governance meeting. Which what's going to happen there? I mean, they're chanting, "We'll be back, we'll be back." I mean, what does that mean?
Thursday's going to be probably even wilder because not only will Sawant's crew, Workers Strike Back, be back, but a bunch of the different renter organizations like Be Seattle, Stop the Sweeps, Services Not Sweeps Coalition. And this is also the meeting that Alexis Mercedes Rink called her supporters and her constituents to attend.
Yes.
So it might be a big turnout and a diversity of tactics. You know, it might be the Workers Strike Back style with some other like styles of comments that, I mean, I'll be there.
Yeah, I know it. We'll be following it. That's Hannah Krieg from The Burner on this Patrons First podcast for Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Hannah, this is rocking. All right, coming up, we got some more stuff to talk about here. A momentous week in Olympia as Governor Bob Ferguson weighs in on several bills, including some controversial budget bills. We're going to break it down on Now Hear This. So Governor Bob Ferguson had 20 days after the legislature wrapped up its session, not including Sundays, to make a decision about the near $78 billion budget package he received from the legislature, and he went down to the wire. On the 20th day, which happened to be Tuesday, he made this announcement about his approach to the budget on TVW.
I understand very clearly that this will be a challenging budget for Washingtonians. There's no two ways around that. You know, it will be. But I believe it's a balanced approach. And I think it sets us on a trajectory for a more sustainable future.
Hannah, I know we're just getting this information in about what the governor is doing here, but what was your overall take on it? It doesn't sound like he really cut that much. He talked about some minor changes here, but I never heard the words "we're coming back to a special session." What do you make of what he did here?
Yeah, it looks like he kept most of what the Democrats did in their $9 billion revenue package and then assigned a few more cuts. It looks like the Seattle Times, right after the announcement, is saying $25 million in cuts, not specified where those cuts are coming from, which will be interesting to see. $25 million is pretty small in the scheme of the budget.
Just jumping on this in general, I thought there were a few different things that stood out to me with regard to this budget. One of them was this very interesting point that Ferguson was trying to make. He said, all right, want $100 million. We want to make sure that we're supporting law enforcement around the state. It's been a stat that he's brought up and a number of other local police and sheriffs have brought up. Per capita, Washington has the lowest amount of officers of any state in the U.S. So let's make some dollars happen there. And Democrats, who were in the majority in the House and the Senate, responded to that, and they said, all right, we're going to do this $100 million deal, but we're also going to include this 0.1% sales tax that local governments can use to pay for more law enforcement. This is House Bill 2015. I think this is such an interesting twist on what's happening here because, yes, I think they're giving Ferguson what he wants, but at the same time, they're also giving a bit of a nudge to these local governments who are saying, we need some dollars for these things. What do you make about that law enforcement dance that happened there between Governor Ferguson and the legislature?
You know, Ferguson needed a dub, $100 million in grants. That is one of the things he really promised during the campaign trail. I think it's sort of based on a few false premises about safety and the per capita stat you gave. I mean, we might have the lowest per capita, but that doesn't mean we're the most unsafe per capita.
More police doesn't necessarily mean more public safety. Sure. Okay. Yeah.
And it's unclear that I understand the $100 million in grants is going to be used for like hiring bonuses and stuff, like things to encourage police to more officers. It doesn't seem like hiring incentives have necessarily led to a bunch more cops in places in Washington. They've tried it before. It's a sort of a national shortage. But I know that the sales tax, the councilmanic authority to do a sales tax to pay
meaning it doesn't have to go to a public vote. Keep going.
Right. For not just police, but like other public safety items.
Right. Could be a jail or something like that. I know King County is kind of salivating at that. Yeah, please keep going.
Yeah, and public defenders and stuff like that. I know that that's been a priority of the Washington Association of Cities. They pushed it last year too. So I think there's, a confluence of factors that made both of those things kind of take shape. It'll be interesting. I know the county is, really looking at that councilmanic authority. It's interesting to me to be raising sales tax, which is the most regressive tax we have, to pay for, in many cases, the system that punishes poor people the most. So it's kind of a double whammy. You're punished by the taxation more if you're poor, and then statistically, you're also going to be punished by law enforcement more if you're poor. So it seems a little bit classist, maybe.
One could argue. Yeah.
One could argue.
Can you get back on this one point? You've done a lot of great reporting on progressive revenue over the past several years. And I thought it was really interesting that Governor Inslee, as he was leaving office, was saying, hey, wealth tax, we really need this. And initially, the state legislature said, yes, we do. And they came out with a plan that was really dependent on a wealth tax to bring in a lot of different dollars, et cetera. There was a lot of pushback from Governor Ferguson, who was like, wait a minute, it's kind of an untested thing. We don't want to really lean so heavily on this. Maybe we can do this in the future because we know it's going to go to court, et cetera, and kind of test it out. But to lean so heavily on wealth tax, not a good idea. So it didn't go anywhere. I wanted to talk about the future of that, though, because I really have to think that the sponsors of that wealth tax measure are going to come back in years hence and say, let's try this out. And I felt like maybe there was a little bit of room with Ferguson to see if this could happen in the future. But I don't know what your take is on that, because I think this is a super important issue in a state that clearly still has a very regressive tax system. We're like number 49 out of the 50 states in terms of how regressive our system is. Can you talk about that piece, that wealth tax? Because I feel like that's an issue that's coming back.
The wealth tax is definitely coming back. On the last day of session, Senator Noel Frame did a symbolic vote on the Senate floor over her wealth tax proposal. The House was already sort of done with business, so they didn't take it up. But it was, her wealth tax proposal was much larger than the test balloon that Bob Ferguson said that gave permission for the legislature to attempt. And it passed. It passed with flying colors. I think there were two Democrats, Drew Hansen and don't want to mess it up because I don't remember who it was, but there were two Democrats in the Senate who voted against the wealth tax. And otherwise,
I see. Right. Yeah. I just last question on the future of the legislature in Ferguson. I thought it was a very interesting change, I guess, in the temperature down in Olympia, where you had, I think, Governor Inslee and the legislature, a Democrat-run legislature, really marching in lockstep for the most part over the past several years. This was different this year with Ferguson. I think he was trying to talk a lot tougher on taxes, et cetera. Where do you see that relationship going and building into the future?
I think as is the Democratic Party on the national level, I think the Washington Democratic Party is in a real time of identity crisis. Are they going to go the way of the progressive wing, or are they going to go the way of the more moderate wing? I know that Bob Ferguson really represents this sort of like ultra moderate Democrat, and I know that there's perhaps some like presidential ambitions that I think he revels in the idea that he doesn't get along with the Democrats in the state legislature. And I think that's only going to continue. He wants to be seen as the Democrat who wrangled the progressives in Washington. Like there's like a narrative there. If you want to be a West Coast governor who runs for president, that you have to be sort of the adult in the room with all the communists in the state legislature.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. That's a great observation. I wonder what happens with that next, because I could very much see those aspirations moving forward here. And being a West Coast governor, you got to be able to wrangle with the legislature, I guess. All right, well, points to ponder there. Coming up next, I want to talk about the life of an independent journalist. Just how full of intrigue, thrills, chills, and excitement is it really? We're going to get the real story behind The Burner with my special guest co-host, Hannah Krieg, coming up on What's Next. Hannah, many people in Seattle know you from your work at the Stranger newspaper, but you made a decision a few months ago to launch The Burner. Becoming an independent voice in the world of journalism is not easy. Can you talk about why and how you made that call for yourself?
I didn't have much of a choice.
I suppose, yeah, right, yeah. Stranger let you go. Yeah, I get it, yeah.
But I'm really excited to be doing my own thing. I've had really great reception, and really I I don't think all the drama that went down at the Stranger after the sale has really hurt my reputation at all. I'm only growing all across social media, and I've only created more source relationships, and I see all the doors are wide open for me. And there's nowhere else in Seattle I really was interested in working. I really love doing journalism that has a clear agenda, a clear bias. I think all journalism has a bias, and I like doing work that states that outright. I think that's how I feel I can do journalism honestly. And so I've been really enjoying building and growing, and every day I'm building and growing more.
Yeah.
So
No, thank you for sharing that. A quick one, the name origin on the burner. Can you explain that to our listening audience, please?
So when there was I was during all the drama
of being released from the Stranger. Okay.
Yeah. I was seeing a lot of fake accounts pop up on Twitter. Accounts that fake is kind of a mean word, but accounts that were made January 2025 with 3 followers, no profile, no discernible
media
traits, except that they were followed by or only following or followed by people who didn't like me.
Oh no. Okay.
And so it seemed pretty clear to me that there was a concerted effort to make burner accounts to, spread a narrative about me and my colleague, Ashley Nurbevig. And so the whole time I wasn't tweeting because I wanted to, I didn't want to mess up the investigation. I was taking it very seriously.
Yeah.
And I was I just wish I could have a burner account. I really just want a burner. And then that just kept on coming back to me. And so now it's I don't really want to have to hide behind a fake account. I want to be able to say what I'm going to say with my face. And so this is my burner. The burner is my burner.
I love it. It's got that burner phone kind of a feel. Yeah. It's great. It's great. Quickly on this, you've kind of touched on this, but what role do you see independent news voices having in this world of established news voices like the Times, the Stranger, et cetera? Where do you fit in, or how do you see that?
I just see that there's so much strength in this newsfluencer model is what I like to call it from the right. So for example, the Jonathan Cho's of the world, the Brandy Cruz of the world, who are, they're doing their own thing outside of, they're backed by the Discovery Institute and I'm backed by my Ko-Fi. So it's a little bit different, but they are really winning this kind of attention war and being able to propagandize in a way that the left doesn't really have a model for that. I think the Stranger sort of wants to be that, but they're not, writing enough stuff. They're not multimedia enough.
Not there yet.
Getting that kind of attention or that kind of, and I think they're also moving away from personality reporters.
Right.
It's a different model now, which is fine.
Yeah. That's so interesting. It feels like a whole other podcast on this topic for sure, Hannah. But I do need to wrap up with you. What's next for the burner? You got the website, you got the blog, you got the podcast. Is it a full-length feature film, or where do you see the burner heading? What do you got?
The burner will be holding a candidate forum on July 10th. We'll have the city attorney candidates and many of the mayoral candidates and almost all of the District 2 candidates. And we're going to be doing a sort of comedy kind of forum with some local theater groups in Seattle. And that's going to be July 10th at First Baptist Church. I think it starts doors open at 6:30. It's free. And I think we really want to build a presence in the community and be an important resource. And I think this election is going to be a good time for us to start doing that.
I know hot girls listen to the burner, but everyone's invited, sounds like. I love it. I love it. Hannah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. That's Hannah Krieg. She is of The Burner. You can check it out anywhere on social media. Make sure you check it out. Thank you, Hannah, for being with me. Thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Thanks again to patrons who support the show. And how cool is it that you were able to check out this Patrons First podcast before anybody else? So that's what's up. If you're not a patron, please become one. Pledges start at just $5 a month on Patreon. Greatly appreciated if you could join in. You can hear this podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. Thanks for watching on Converge Media, too. See you next time.
Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2025.